everybody. Episode 705 of the podcast. It is Week America, the Outdoor Sports Podcast presented by Betfred Sportsbook. It is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. People, I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody is having a great day. And as I've told you many times, these early May, late April, whatever, these episodes are not supposed to be as loaded as they are, but we got about 40, 50 minutes of nonstop action-packed entertainment. Here's what you need to know about today's show. We'll open with a little bit of portal news. We thought the portal was dying down, but then a couple very interesting stories the last couple days. Hunter Dickinson, a pseudo announcement that wasn't an announcement. It captivated the internet on Monday, Tuesday, whatever it was. We'll discuss that. Also, very interesting new addition to the portal. An NBA draft prospect has entered the portal. Very interesting name to keep an eye on. We will discuss that. Take a quick break, come back. In Mackenzie Mgbako, remember, he was the player who was committed to Duke, decommits, 5-star. He is available, and I think we're starting to get a picture of where he is going to go. Then finally, we will wrap with two college football stories. First of all, 12-team playoff, not this coming season, but the following one. The schedule is out, and boy, oh boy, is it a doozy. And oh, by the way, did you see the latest Big 12 expansion news? Big 12 maybe expanding to Mexico? Not exactly, but I explain. As I said, loaded show, fun show, no more time to waste. So with that said, let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, bottom line, as I told you, it really felt like the transfer portal was starting to die down. But much like that Undertaker gif on social media, it's back, baby. It's coming back from the grave, and it is alive. And all of the news on Tuesday, most of the big news since we last recorded, centers on the best player in the portal, Hunter Dickinson. And if you listen to Monday's show, we did a pseudo Hunter Dickinson update where I basically said, I think two things are on the table here for Hunter Dickinson. One, I suspect we'll start to get some sort of movement here in the next couple days. We think his visits are done. And again, he's a player. He's got to enroll at his next school probably by the end of this month, early June at the latest. So we'll probably start to get something over the next couple days. Maybe an announcement date, maybe we're going to get something. And then from there, I also said, I think Kansas is the favorite, but I don't know that there is a favorite because even I don't know if Hunter Dickinson knows at this point where he plans on going. So why do I bring it up? It is because Tuesday was a very adventurous day in terms of Hunter Dickinson's recruitment, updates, non-updates, etc. So let me explain. If you were off social media, if you were off the internet all day Tuesday, here's what you need to know. It really started on Monday night when Hunter Dickinson, he hosts, I think most people know, but he hosts a podcast on Barstool Sports. I think it's called the Round Ball Podcast with Hunter Dickinson. And his co-host on that show, his name's Marty Mush. I think he's a very funny guy. He put out a tweet on Monday night that said, recording Round Ball Pod tomorrow morning. What school do you think Hunter is going to? And so that tweet goes out Monday night, and then it just creates a firestorm on the internet where everybody assumes that Hunter Dickinson is absolutely committing on Tuesday. He's going to go on his show. He's going to, promote the show, and then he is going to tell us where he's going. Now, I said, on Twitter, I said, I don't know. It seems like a quick turnaround from the last visit at Villanova, but it sent the internet into a frenzy. And Monday night into Tuesday, the question was, when does this show drop, and is he making an official commitment? Well, as the day went on, you started to get some details. Marty Mush goes on with my buddy Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio, and he says, look, I'm just the host. Whatever Hunter wants to do, I support him. I don't know if he's going to commit. I don't know if he's not going to commit, but stay tuned and pay attention, and we'll start to get answers later this afternoon when we record the show. So even his own co-host said, I don't really think he's going to commit, but you never know. And then from there, it just turned into a brilliant marketing ploy by Barstool, where it was, we're gonna tape the show at 4. No, it's going to be 4:30. No, we'll start a little bit later. And will Hunter Dickinson commit? Make sure to stay tuned to see what happens. Now, if you listen to that show, and I actually did, I was actually out walking the dog, so the timing kind of worked out well anyway. Unfortunately, Hunter Dickinson did not commit, and we really didn't get that much clarification on what is going to happen with his recruitment. But what I would like to do is take 2 minutes to defend Hunter Dickinson here. Because in my opinion, and this is something I've talked about on this show every time that we've talked about Hunter Dickinson, I think there's this perception out there that he's doing it for exposure. He's doing it for attention. He's an attention whore. He's only doing it for clicks. He's only doing it to promote his show. Now, I do believe once Barstool kind of realized how big this could be, they very smartly decided to promote it and push it back and, hey, make sure to subscribe to the channel and blah, 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 blah. But I don't think Hunter Dickinson is actively misleading people just to build up his commitment. As a matter of fact, I actually think it's the opposite. If you listen to the show, and again, I was able to listen to most of it, he kind of said, like, if I had an answer, I would have done it by now because I'm kind of over this. And so it goes back to a lot of what we've discussed on this show previously. I don't blame Hunter Dickinson. What you have to understand, what we all have to understand, not you as in you're wrong and I'm right. What we all have to understand, this is, in my opinion, the biggest decision maybe that Hunter Dickinson from a basketball standpoint will ever make. He's probably not an NBA player. He's going into his senior year in college. Now, we know he's got the extra COVID year, so he could, in theory, play 2 more years. But let's just assume this is probably his last year of college basketball. He'll probably get a degree at the end of next year, whatever. So I bring it up because think about everything that's riding on this decision. He needs to go to the best place that is going to put him in position to succeed individually, to become the best NBA draft prospect he can be, to develop his skill set the best that it can be, to maybe feature him in a way that he felt like he wasn't being featured at Michigan. It is maybe his last chance to compete at the highest levels of college basketball in terms of a national championship. Remember, he made an Elite Eight as a freshman, has not been back to the tournament since. You think trying to figure out where he can go and have individual success, but also have team success, you don't think that's a factor in this decision? Oh, by the way, let's call a spade a spade. NIL. I think everybody is kind of in the same ballpark. Like, I don't think anybody in that Final Five can't give him NIL money or is going to be completely outbid by others. But let's be honest about this. This might be the best payday he ever gets playing basketball the rest of his life. We don't know that for sure, but we know the numbers that an Oscar Tshiebwe made at Kentucky. We know the numbers that some of these other big-time stars in college basketball have made. And so because of it, that is all factored in as well. And oh, by the way, and this is an important part nobody's talking about, he finished his final visit on Sunday night at Villanova. So just think about that. Really, if you think about when he recorded the show, 4:30 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, he leaves Villanova. He leaves Philadelphia probably about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock on Sunday. And less than 48 hours later, you expect him to make a decision this big? I just don't buy it. And so I don't blame him. I don't think this is a publicity stunt from his perspective. Now, from his company's perspective, it might be, and it should be. Monetize the crap out of this thing. Suck every last dollar out of it that you can. But this is a decision that is going to potentially redefine his financial future, his professional future, his personal future. You think if he's not the missing piece on a national championship team at probably Villanova, Kentucky, or Kansas, that's not going to set him up financially for the rest of his life? Just think about it. You're the star of a national championship team at Kansas, Kentucky, Villanova. You're going to be reaping benefits of that for the next 50 years of your life. Whatever. So you get the point. I don't need to keep going on and on. What I will say is I do think this is a tough decision. I do think there's a lot to weigh. National championship potential, development potential. Oh, by the way, NIL. Oh, by the way, the friendships that he's built with guys like Justin Moore, the personal relationships that he has with the Maryland coaching staff, with the Kentucky coaching staff that coached him out of high school, that recruited him out of high school. There are a lot of factors to be weighed, and I don't blame him for waiting. In terms of a decision, I've said it from day one. I don't even think Hunter Dickinson knows. But since every one of you asked me, since the DMs are overflowing, my hunch is probably still Kansas. But listening to him speak about all his visits, he had really good things to say about John Calipari, about the experience at Kentucky, eating chicken tenders with John Calipari at a steakhouse, Jeff Ruby's. And he also had some really interesting things to say about Villanova. One of his best friends, Justin Moore, plays there. All the former players reaching out to him. And also Jay Wright sitting in on the meeting, almost like a Pat Riley type role at Villanova, the way Pat Riley's kind of the president of basketball operations with Miami. So it sounds like there's some really good options for him. I do think we probably get a decision by the end of this week, but I'm not going to blame him, and I'm not going to be mad that he has not made a decision yet. Quickly, let's change gears. Let's switch gears. Let's switch lanes, whatever you want to call it. There was a very interesting tripping over my own words here, piece of news out of the transfer portal on Tuesday when a very, very, very high profile player named Grant Nelson from North Dakota State entered the transfer portal. And before I get into who this kid is and what it means and where he could end up, this is an important little nugget here to kind of keep in your back pocket. Grab it, throw it in your little pocket, okay? So we're coming up, we just passed a very important deadline, and we're coming up on another deadline, and they're kind of two ships crossing in the night. And it's important to note here over the next couple of weeks in the portal. So this past Sunday was the deadline to enter the NBA draft. So if you're a player that even wants to test the waters and keep your college options open, you had to declare by this past Sunday. Next, I'm trying to do some quick math in my head here. Next Thursday is the deadline for college players to enter the transfer portal. In other words, if you're not in by next Thursday, you can't transfer and be eligible to play next year. Now, you don't have to commit by next Thursday, but you have to put your name in the portal. You have to submit the paperwork for it to be done. So it's an interesting time, because what I expect to see over the next not 2-3 weeks, but the next, whatever it is, 9 days between now and May 11th, I expect to see a number of players who have entered the NBA draft to also enter the transfer portal. And the idea kind of being, hey, I'm probably pursuing this NBA thing, but on the chances that I need to come back to college basketball, I want to have as many options as I can. I want to be able to return to the school that I'm at, but I also want to be able to see if there's something else out there for me. We've seen this quite a bit over the last couple of years. Remember, Pete Nance did this last year. Entered the NBA draft, tested the waters, all that good stuff, ended up deciding to return, but he had entered the portal. He ends up at North Carolina, was at Northwestern before. A few years ago, the deadline was much later. Marcus Carr did the same. He was one of several guys that did stuff like that. Entered the portal when the season ended, kind of was quiet in the portal, went through the draft process. It didn't work out, and he ends up deciding to come back to college and play at Texas. So this is all being brought up because on Tuesday, a player took that exact path, and a very high-profile player, his name is Grant Nelson. Now, some of you probably sitting there saying either Torres, I never heard of this guy, or could he be that good? I'm here to tell you this kid's a legitimate NBA draft prospect, okay? Played at North Dakota State the last 3 years. By the way, from a beautiful little town called Devil's Fork, North Dakota. Looked it up. It's not very big. I can promise you that. But kind of a small school guy, went to North Dakota State the last couple of years, and this year he really blew up. 17 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. And if you watch film of him, skilled, can handle the ball. You know, he's kind of one of these guys. He can grab a rebound, go, dribble, pass, shoot, catch, outlet, whatever. So there'd been I'll say this, there'd been whispers in the Twitter streets over the last couple of weeks that he could enter. And on Tuesday, he decides to enter. Now, what will be interesting to see is, does he ever play college basketball again? As I said, he is projected by some as a second-round pick. I saw Sam Vecini put out his big board over at The Athletic. Grant Nelson was right outside that top 60, which obviously there's only 60 draft spots. I think it might even be a few less because of some certain things. This kid's a legitimate NBA draft prospect, though, and my understanding of his situation is that right now, as of this second, his plan is to see the draft process through. that in a perfect world, he is going to declare for the draft. He's already done that, go through workouts, get some kind of promise that is satisfactory to him, either a pick guarantee, hey, we'll pick you at some point in the second round, or a two-way guarantee, which would, allow him a certain amount of money. And if that's the case, my hunch is his plan is to stay in the draft. But if he decides to come back to college, I can promise you there will be a long list of schools that are very interested in him. But I can also say that as soon as Grant Nelson's name hit the portal, there was one school that I heard above all others that would make the most sense for Grant Nelson. And that is the school that is seemingly in on every transfer and every big-time prospect coming out of high school, and that is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Now, a couple things here that's important. One, as I just said, for the most part, my understanding is that Grant Nelson's plan is to continue to test the NBA draft waters to see the process through until the end. Deadline to withdraw from the NBA draft is late May, so this one probably won't get resolved anytime soon. Two, I already know what you're going to ask. Torres, how does Arkansas have so many scholarships? Well, here's the bottom line. We talked about it on Monday's show with Ron Holland, the five-star prospect, and we'll talk about it again here. I understand that there's a lot of moving parts at Arkansas. I understand that they've already taken 5 transfers this offseason. But right now, there are 13 scholarships with 2 players testing the NBA draft waters, Devo Davis and Jordan Walsh. And so in the coming days, in the coming weeks, we're going to get clarification on them. And as of right now, we might have 2 more scholarships become available at Arkansas. So there's a lot of moving parts, as there are with every program this time of year. And I think Arkansas, and frankly, not just Arkansas, I think a lot of programs did their homework and knew that this possibility could be coming, and that if he's available, that is a kid that we would be very much interested in sitting down with, talking with, and potentially bringing him in. Now, beyond Arkansas, first of all, let me say this too, by the way. If Arkansas gets him, I don't even know what to say about the roster that they would have together. Grant Nelson, NBA prospect. Trevin Brazile, NBA prospect. Bay Fall, McDonald's All-American in the front court. In the back court, L. Ellis, 17 points per game at Louisville. Tremont Mark at Houston. Maybe Devo Davis is back. Maybe Jordan Walsh is back. Point being, there is a lot of moving parts with this Arkansas squad, but I already have them in my top 5. You add Grant Nelson to the mix here. Whew. You might be talking about right up there with Duke, maybe UConn, maybe a couple others, depending on where Hunter Dickinson goes as a national championship favorite. By the way, a couple of, I don't think there's much other intel out there on Grant Nelson. Heard a little bit of Creighton buzz. Creighton is in that area of the country. There's ties between the 2 staffs. I believe Greg McDermott at one point coached at North Dakota State. I could be mistaken on that. They obviously got Baylor Shireman last year out of South Dakota State, and they too could have an opening on their roster depending on what Ryan Kalkbrenner does. Bottom line, stay tuned. But Grant Nelson, I believe, is officially right now the second best player in the portal behind Hunter Dickinson. So keep an eye on him. It will be interesting to follow. By the way, a couple other news and notes from the portal. One, big time name went in last week, Jordan Dingle, who was the Ivy League Player of the Year at Penn, second leading scorer in college basketball. Another player who's currently testing the NBA draft waters that will also see what college options are out there. I don't know that it makes a ton of sense for Kentucky, but his dad did play for John Calipari at UMass back in the day. I remember his dad very well. I'm feeling very old thinking about it. There's some ties to Rick Pitino, so maybe St. John's gets into the mix, but a lot of different variables with him. And then one more name to keep an eye on that I've heard a lot of good things about. I saw him play in person this year, but heard good things out of the portal. Trey White, a player who started his career at USC, started every game at USC, entered the portal. Alabama's on him, maybe to replace Jaquan Walton, the kid that got kicked out of the program even before he signed. I know Alabama fans, he wasn't officially with the program, but we all get it. And yeah, Alabama's one, Louisville's one. Interesting name to keep an eye on in the portal. By the way, as this stuff keeps going, we're going to keep updating. Eventually it will end. I'm just not sure when it will be. All right, so what I'll do, take a quick break, come back, and when I come back, we will talk about the other big news in college basketball. That is 5-star Mackenzie Mgbako. This is the kid that was committed to Duke, recently decommitted. He is in the midst of his visits. I believe as I'm recording right now, he is in Lawrence, Kansas, visiting the Jayhawks, also visited St. John's. Take a quick break, discuss his recruitment. That's coming up next. All right, we're getting back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I want to welcome back our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. The NBA playoffs are here, and nobody has you covered quite like Betfred. By now, you know Betfred's story. Started in 1967 in the UK. Over 1,200 shops in the UK. They have since come to the United States and made a major splash. They are not only the presenting sponsor of the Aaron Torres podcast and all things Aaron Torres media, but also the Cincinnati Bengals, the Colorado Rockies, the Denver Broncos. And what I love about Betfred Sportsbook is that nobody takes care of their customers quite like Betfred. You've seen the Betfred Sportsbook suite at Bengals games. It is hopping. We have sent listeners of this show to Denver Broncos VIP tailgates. Betfred bettors have thrown out first pitches at Colorado Rockies games. Again, nobody takes care of you like Betfred Sportsbook does. And here is what they are doing for the NBA playoffs. How about this for a deal? Bet $50 on any game all playoffs long. Get up to $1,111 in free bets. Here's how it works. Download the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. You automatically get $111 in free bets. But beyond that, here is what else Betfred does for you. They're going to give you up to $200 in insurance for the first 5 weeks that you're a Betfred customer. So maybe you make a bad pick. We all do. We've all been there. Trust me. You followed my picks in March Madness. It happens. So you bet 200, doesn't work out. Get 200 insurance for the first 5 weeks that you are a Betfred customer, equating up to $1,111 in free bets thanks to Betfred. Again, nobody takes care of you like Betfred does. Love working with them. They are the presenting sponsor of the Aaron Torres pod. Tell them Torres sent you. Download the Betfred Sportsbook app right now. All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. Do want to, but what's wild is, and this is crazy because it's May 1st, 2023, May 2nd, May 3rd, whenever you're listening to this. There is another really high leverage, high impact guy that is available. A guy that we talked about 2 weeks ago, have not circled back on since, but we need to now because there is some new information. That player is Mackenzie Mgbako. Mackenzie Mgbako is a 5-star member of the class of 2023 high school basketball. So basically about to graduate and again, getting ready to enroll in college. He was a McDonald's All-American, Nike Hoop Summit, was a guy that was committed to Duke, but we obviously talked about him about 2.5 weeks ago because right as the spring really started to ramp up, he ends up decommitting from Duke and reopening his recruitment. And so at the time, we talked about a couple schools that made sense. I gave you a list. And in the last couple days, Mackenzie Mgbako has actually cut down that list to 4 schools, 3 of which I suspected he would be on his final list. The 4 schools, according to Adam Zagoria from Zags Blogs, SNY, he will visit St. John's, Kansas State, Indiana, and Louisville. Now, it's worth noting, he actually took his visit to St. John's this weekend. That is complete. As I record here, he is in Lawrence, Kansas, visiting with Bill Self and the Jayhawks. And so what I want to do now, talk a little bit about Mgbako, the 4 schools, what the pitches I think are, and ultimately just kind of give you how I think everything stacks up here over the next couple weeks as we get set for his commitment. First of all, in terms of Mgbako, listen, I've said it. I think he might be the best NBA prospect in this high school class of 2023, okay? 6'8", big forward, super athletic, strong, really has everything that you would want from that new age forward. Big, can handle the ball, can step out and hit threes. He was phenomenal, by the way, in the Nike Hoop Summit game. I think it was actually a day or 2 before he decommitted from Duke, but finished with a game-high 22 points and just a really good player. Has every measurable you want from an NBA perspective, has every intangible you want from an NBA perspective. And I truly believe, I don't think there's a lot of freshmen in this 2023 class that are going to have an impact on college basketball next year, but I do think that he is one of them. And so what I want to do now is talk about the 4 schools, which ones make sense, which ones don't. My guess is he's probably considering all 4, or why take the visits. So let's get into those 4 and what I kind of think the strengths and weaknesses are of each. Let's start with the first school, the school that the school that he actually visited this past weekend, a school that I've talked about a lot this spring, and that is St. John's, coached by Rick Pitino, my guy. Oh, you can get your Big Rick Energy t-shirt at eratorresonline.com. By the way, we'll have a link in the show description below. But I'll say this, is that, Rick Pitino picked up another nice commitment on Monday, guard named Glenn Taylor, 11.5 points per game out of Oregon State. But I have had a few St. John's fans reach out to me like, Torres, when is that first big thing? Like, when is the first major monumental program changing thing coming? And I'll say this, first of all, I think even just getting a visit from this kid and being in his Final Four, I think is a great first step. Now, listen, this is big boy college basketball. There are no participation trophies. You don't get a blue ribbon for finishing in second place. But it was interesting over the weekend because Mackenzie Mgbako did share some stuff on social media, on his Instagram page about his visit from St. John's. And I give St. John's credit because it appears as though they're rolling out the red carpet. It appears as though, first of all, they're in the mix again. I know St. John's recruited him the first time around. I don't think they're in the Final Four if Mike Anderson is still the head coach. So they're in the Final Four, and it was clear this weekend what their pitch was to him. You saw the pictures on Instagram. Andrew Slater, a great recruiting writer, by the way, who is close to the Mgbako family, also put out a couple pictures that were shared with Mackenzie that he then shared on social media. Kind of the cliche, his picture next to the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building. There was a little hashtag like New York City's basketball team. And so I bring it up because St. John's is essentially giving the recruiting pitch that I said they would and they should when he first announced his decommitment from Duke. He's a New York kid, plays basketball in in New Jersey, but he's from the tri-state area. And basically what I think their recruiting pitch to him is essentially this. Listen, we're in the process of a rebuild. Why don't you come in your hometown, be the face of this rebuild, play for a Hall of Fame coach in the world's most famous arena? You can go anywhere else, but there's only one place that you can become a hometown hero. And there's only one place that you can go where, you're the hometown hero and you will be forever remembered in a positive way if this program gets rebuilt by this coaching staff like we all will. Listen, you can go to Kansas and compete for a national championship, just like pretty much every player that has gone to Kansas over the last 25 years has. You'll be great. You'll be incredible. You'll still get drafted, all that good stuff. You can go to Indiana. You can go to Louisville, play for great coaches there. You're certainly a great coach at Indiana and Mike Woodson. We'll see about Kenny Payne, but Kenny Payne does have an NBA background behind him. And you could go there and have success, but there's only one place that you will forever be an icon. There's only one place that you can forever be the guy that is the face of a rebuild, and that's here at St. John's in your hometown. I'm sure they're pitching mom and dad can come see every home game. You can go home on the weekends and see them. And I love this pitch from St. John's. Now, will it work? There's 3 other schools in the mix. It remains to be seen. But again, this kid is going to be a one and done, okay? He's only playing college basketball for 1 year. And so you could go to Louisville and be another guy for a great program. Indiana, be another guy for a great program. Kansas, another guy for a great program. You come here as a New York City kid. We're now on a 23-year streak of 0 NCAA tournament wins. Come here, help us get to the tournament in year 1, help us rebuild this program, and you will forever be an icon here. Last thought on Mackenzie Mgbako from the St. John's perspective, and we'll get to the other teams. I am told by people, let's just say that NIL will not be an issue. And I know small Catholic school, whatever, compared to 2 big state schools, 3 big public schools, if you include Louisville, NIL is not going to be a factor at St. John's. We all know that since Rick Pitino got there, they have increased a lot of different things, including that NIL pool. And so I do believe that, they'll be able to compete with any dollar amount that anybody throws out. So that's the St. John's perspective. I think it's the most interesting one. And beyond that, let's talk about the other 3 schools that I do believe are a factor here. Let's start with Kansas. As I record here late Monday, Mackenzie Mgbako is in fact on a trip to Kansas. And I think Kansas conversation kind of sells itself, right? We're great every year. Like St. John's, we have a Hall of Fame coach. The difference is, come here, you're a missing piece. We actually need a guy just like you. But then 2, come here, and of your 4 finalists, this is probably the only place that realistically you can win a national championship next year. Because you look at Kansas, first of all, coming off another Big 12 regular season title. That's just what Bill Self does. But you look at the pieces that are starting to come together on this Kansas squad. I like this group a lot. DeJuan Harris is back from this past year and the 2022 national championship team. We'll see about Kevin McCullough, who's testing the NBA draft waters. They just added Nick Timberlake, a 6'4" guard, who, by the way, St. John's wanted, UConn wanted, North Carolina wanted. Everybody in college basketball wanted this kid. Averaged about 17.5 points per game, 43% three-point shooting. He is now at Kansas. They also just added Arterio Morris, big-time guard, former McDonald's All-American who played last year at Texas. They have KJ Adams down low, and Mackenzie Mgbako, however you pronounce whatever. Mackenzie Mgbako, he would be one of 2 marquee players that Kansas is very much after late in this cycle. 1 is Mgbako. We're talking about him right now. 2 is obviously Hunter Dickinson, which we talked about a lot on Monday's show. And so we'll see if the Hunter Dickinson thing comes to fruition. But if you look at Mgbako, the backcourt is set. The front court, if they don't get Hunter Dickinson, still has last year's starting center and KJ Adams. He's a little bit undersized. If you could get Hunter Dickinson, you take him. But the one thing that they are missing, that big wing, that difference maker at the 4, which they had this year with Jalen Wilson, which Grady Dick kind of played some 4 and some small ball lineups when Jalen Wilson was off the court. They have had a lot of good players on the wing through the years. Andrew Wiggins, Kelly Oubre, Xavier Henry, for those of you who are old enough to remember that name. Mackenzie Mgbako, come be the next one, compete for a national championship. And oh, by the way, we might get you and Hunter Dickinson, and we're probably entering next year #1 in the country. So come here, do it, be part of what we're doing. That is my pitch. That is my guess on their pitch. And like everywhere else, I think NIL is not going to be an issue if that's where he wants to go. Really quickly, the other 2. Louisville, they were the one from day one that was linked to this kid. And for people who don't know why, Nolan Smith is the lead assistant at Louisville, their lead recruiter. He was actually Mgbako's lead recruiter when he was the assistant at Duke. And so there's a pre-existing relationship. And, listen, the second that Mackenzie Mgbako, entered the portal. I was going to say enter the portal, but the second Mackenzie Mgbako decided to reopen his recruitment, Louisville was the school that naturally made sense. Now, when I look at this one, what I would say is, I get it. I do. I guess what I would say is, I'll just say this. I'm not saying it won't be Louisville. What I am saying is I've never gotten the impression that it is as much of a lock as some people have wanted to make it seem. On the one hand, yes, I know. One and done. Like I said, no matter where you go, you're going to be a top 10 pick next year, no matter what. And I get the ties to Nolan Smith. But if you're going to go somewhere that is in a rebuild, why wouldn't you go to the hometown school, be the hometown hero, play in the world's most famous arena at Madison Square Garden? To me, that makes sense. If you're going to be the face of a rebuild, you might as well do it for a Hall of Fame coach in your hometown, as opposed to a school at Louisville that, listen, Louisville has very much upgraded the talent on that roster this offseason. They added Sky Clark, the transfer from Illinois. They added Dennis Evans, a 5-star center from out here in California, about an hour from where I live. They've added Trenton Flowers, a really good reclassification kid from the class of 2024. But Mackenzie Mgbako would still be the face of that rebuild. I guess my question is, do you trust that Kenny Payne will have things significantly better in year 2? Are you going to be playing for a ACC title, at the very least an NCAA tournament bid? Because if you're going to a place that is starting from ground zero, I would go to the place, if you're starting from the bottom, to use a bad Drake pun, right? If you're starting from the bottom, go to the place that at least you're going to play for a Hall of Fame coach that has developed prospect after prospect after prospect. But we will see the impact that Nolan Smith and that relationship has going forward. Finally, with Indiana, this one was kind of a shot out of left field. I mean, we have our Torres on accounts. We have about 13, 14 of them now. By the way, Torres on St. John's, Torres on a bunch of other ones, Kentucky, Arkansas, whatever. We do have a Torres on Indiana account run by an Indiana student. And I texted him when we got the news that Mgbako would make these 4 visits. And I said to him, I said, like, are you surprised by this? He's like, yeah, I'm very surprised. I was not expecting this at all. So we'll see if Indiana can get in the mix. And one thing I will say about Indiana, they have a very intriguing group right now that is really probably a piece away from being really good. Khalil Ware is a very interesting piece transferring in from Oregon. Trey Galloway. Xavier Johnson was just declared eligible for this season. Got a waiver because he was out of eligibility, but because he missed so many games, he was allowed to have the extra year in Bloomington this year. So we'll see if Indiana can make up ground, but I'll just say, man, you look at these 4 schools, it is fascinating, and you look at these 4 schools, and it'll be curious to see what happens. This is just speculation on my part. I don't have it, incredibly sourced. If I had to guess, because people have asked me, of those 4, I feel like I know Louisville was in the driver's seat early, but I think Kansas and St. John's are probably the 2 to watch out for. If I had to make a bet, I'd say Kansas, but I don't even know if this kid fully knows right now. But Kansas has a lot to offer. All 4 schools have a lot to offer, but that is what I'm thinking for Mackenzie Mgbako. So we will see. We will keep you updated, and we will have some reaction when he actually commits. But Mackenzie Mgbako currently in the middle of his visits, and I think this kid is a difference maker wherever he ends up next year. All right, everybody. Hi, back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. And I do want to wrap with a little bit of college football. So we've done a lot of college hoops, and that's okay. It's cool. It's that time of year. It's portal season. It's whatever season. A lot of stuff going on. But there were 2 very interesting college football conversations over the last couple days that I do want to get to. The first one is this. Not sure if you heard, but there is going to be a 12-team playoff in college football. Not this coming year, but the following one. Not sure if you heard, but it's happening. Okay, and yes, I'm being sarcastic. I know all of you know. Why I bring it up is because over the last couple days, we actually got a look at what the schedule is going to look like for the first 2 years of the expanded 12-team college football playoff. And I bring it up because if you saw it, what you saw is that we are about to get a football smorgasbord in year 1 and year 2, unlike anything that we've ever seen. Okay. So first of all, we all know opening round on campus, we get all that. That's late December. The way the schedule falls the first 2 years is that most of the quarterfinal games, so that would be the round of 8, the Elite 8, if you will be played on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. Standard college football stuff, right? Here's where it gets interesting, though. The semifinals, the 2 semifinals, how about this? They will be played for the first 2 years on the Thursday and Friday leading into wild card weekend in the NFL. That's right. If you're following this in your head, this is what we're going to get. We're going to get Thursday college football playoff semifinal. So this year, maybe it would have been Michigan TCU on a Thursday. Then on Friday, we get the second semifinal, Georgia, Ohio State. Then we immediately get, because the calendar's been pushed back, we immediately get 2 NFL wildcard games on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and 1 on Monday. So in total, not great at math, but that is 8 single elimination, high leverage football games over the 5 in January. That is unbelievable. First of all, clear the schedule now. Tell your wife, honey, January 2024, I'm busy. There's like a 5-day stretch. I need you to take the kids out of town. I need you to go to grandma's. I need you to do something other than be here because we got 5 straight days of football that's going to be insane. It is going to be like March Madness on steroids, okay? With those 5 straight games, 5 straight days of wall-to-wall football. Now, it's worth noting it is only for the first 2 years because if you remember, the college football playoff, basically, if you remember how it all came together, the expansion essentially came from the school presidents. If you remember last year on Labor Day, it was going into Labor Day weekend. The school presidents all approved expansion of the college football playoff and basically said to the commissioners, you guys, we're done listening to you argue about it. 12 teams coming in 2024, make it happen. Now, that is prior to the current contract expiring. And so because of it, they've had to move some stuff around with bowl games and all this and all that. So once we get past the first 2 years, which would be January 2025, and I guess it would be, by the way, I think I said January 2024, clear the schedule. It would actually be January 2025, the 2024 season. So 2025, 2026, insanity. Now, I will add that once the TV contracts change over, it is going to go to more of a traditional schedule that we know with college football. The rumor is they're going to move up the regular season by a week. So it would be the final week of August into Labor Day weekend. And then from there, they'll start the playoff a week earlier. They'll play the semifinals basically on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and then end the season as they do now, where we're talking about January 8th, 9th, 10th, something like that. So this isn't an all-time thing. Now, what I could see happening, I could see this working out so well that college football just decides, you know what, this is what we're going to stick with going forward. But as of right now, it is a plan for just 2 years. But I still think when you're talking about calendar events, 5 straight days of major football, college football semifinal, 2 wildcard games, 3 wildcard games, that Monday wildcard game, it is going to be insanity. It is going to be football unlike anything we've ever seen. And I cannot wait. Finally, the last little topic that I do want to get to before we get out of here. Did you see the latest from Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark? Okay. So Brett Yormark, I don't know him. I would love to get to know him. I would love to have coffee or a beer with him because this man, at the very least, is a visionary. Remember, he took over after the Big 12, after Texas and Oklahoma left, and everybody left the Big 12 for dead. And where everybody else saw a dead conference, Brett Yormark saw opportunity. He's a business guy. He's a marketing guy. He comes from Rock Nation, the agency that Jay-Z owns. And so he's had a lot of different ideas, which we'll get to in a second. The most recent idea, and this was via an article from the Houston Chronicle. How about this? Seeing the success of international sports in the NBA and in the NFL playing in London, the NFL playing in Mexico City, the NBA playing in Mexico, the NBA playing in the United Arab Emirates. Brett Yormark wants to bring Big 12 football and Big 12 basketball to, drumroll please, he wants to play some games in Mexico. And I will say this. First of all, 1 game in Mexico for football, 1 game in Mexico for basketball. The football game would be played in Monterrey, I believe, the basketball game in Mexico City. I have 2 very differing thoughts on this that I want to talk about before we wrap the show. I find this very interesting. I will say that as a business owner, as a guy who owns his own business and is always looking to expand, I absolutely love this. But as a practical, realistic guy that knows the world of college sports, I don't know if this is going to be a sell. Now, let's start with the positive. And let me say this. From a business perspective, I am always looking for interesting new ways. I'm a business owner, okay? Aaron Torres Media. Own my podcast, own my YouTube, own other podcasts, etc. And I'm always trying to think of different ways to expand the business, different ways to get other people involved in what we're doing, different ways to get loyal customers. That's why we do merchandise. That's why we do podcasts. That's why we do YouTube. That's why we cover college football, college basketball. We brought on an NBA writer this spring. Wink, wink. Going to try to get some college baseball stuff going for the end of the spring into Memorial Day weekend. Don't know if it's going to happen, but we're going to try. Always just looking for different ways to engage the audience. And so I bring it up because as a business owner, I love this. And I love the business savvy that Brett Yormark is trying to bring to the Big 12. Beyond just the business savvy, you know what I love? This guy is a totally outside the box thinker, and no idea is too big. No idea is too crazy. Small stuff. Big 12 basketball tournament this year. They did like basically like a fan event before. Shaq was DJing. Yes, Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal was DJing, okay? That was just one of a million things that he's come up with. They're going to create next year a Big 12 only combine for football as a way to highlight some of their star players that might be overlooked. Remember, they're trying to get Gonzaga as a basketball only member. Remember, They're hotly pursuing San Diego State. While Pac-12 thought San Diego State was in the bag, it was Brett Yormark at the national championship game wooing San Diego State. They're trying to break up the Pac-12. They're trying to get those four corner schools, maybe Oregon and Washington as well. I can tell you, there are whispers that they have reached out to my alma mater, UConn, and said, hey, why don't you come play football and bring those basketball programs with us? I have no idea where we are at with that or if UConn will ever consider it, but that is the rumor that I have heard. We'll see if it ends up coming to fruition. And so I bring it up because this is a guy that is never afraid to take big swings, big chances, big opportunities. And he believes that there's a market of fans that he can reach that otherwise would not be able to consume his product. And so you bring Kansas basketball to Mexico City. You bring Kansas State football, Baylor football, whatever, did I say Kansas City? Whatever, Mexico City. You bring Baylor football, Oklahoma State football to Monterey, and you build a new fan base, you build a new audience, and you build brand recognition. So that's the positive of it, and I really like those ideas a lot. The negative, if you want to call it that, I think to execute is going to be a little bit more complicated than he thinks. And let me explain why. A few reasons. First off, this is not something that I think fans of these schools will get behind from the perspective of travel. And usually when you do these international events or whatever, travel events, they're places that fans can easily get to, want to go to, etc. And this is no disrespect to Mexico City. This is no disrespect to Monterey. Have a good friend who's from Monterey, blah, 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 blah. Hear great things. Travel through Mexico City, whatever. But I don't know if Kansas State, or, I think it's Kansas and Houston are the two schools that they have from a basketball perspective that they want to bring to Mexico City. I'm not sold that the fans are excited to travel. And beyond that, I'm not sold that the coaches are going to be excited either. Because remember, for this to happen, somebody's got to give up something. And in this case, it's going to be a marquee home game. So the rumor is that Kansas and Houston are the two basketball schools that they want to bring the first year. Well, you know what that means? It means that either Kansas or Houston is going to have to give up a home game. So imagine telling Bill Self, the dean of college basketball coaches in the Big 12, hey, Coach Self, we love you. Congrats on all those Big 12 titles, those 2 national championships. We appreciate what you've done for this conference. I know on January 11th, you guys are headed to play Houston at Houston. It's going to be their biggest home game in forever, and that place is going to be crazy. But you know that time in February when we have you scheduled to host that same Houston team? Yeah, now you're going to do it 1,000 miles from home in Mexico City. Is that cool? Is that cool? Because I don't think Bill Self is going to be excited. And I think the other part, too, is that it's easier to sell if there's some sort of recruiting, incentive to it. Respectfully, again, not a lot of basketball players in Mexico. And football, believe it or not, is actually more popular than people realize. I actually have a buddy who's from Mexico, played football, like the tackle football in Mexico. I believe it might be the second most popular sport behind soccer. But if you're taking away home games, if your fans can't travel, if there's no recruiting advantage, do think it might be tough to sell to your coaches, but this is something to watch out for. All right, I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I do think it is time for me to get out of here. By the way, one quick announcement before we go, and that's this. I know I say all the time, like, thank you for your support, and it means so much, and all the things that I always say. What's cool is, though, is that sometimes, I have tangible data to show you just the impact that you guys and girls are having on me, my livelihood, my media company that I just explained, everything that I do. So for fun, I went and looked it up. January 1st to May 1st of this year. My YouTube numbers from January 1, 2023 to May 1, 2023 have officially doubled, twice as many from a year ago, January 1, 2022 to May 1, 2022. So when I tell you that I couldn't do this without you, when I tell you that more people are listening to Aaron Torres talking whatever, and I'm not talking to myself in the third person because I'm cool. I'm just saying, like I say all the time, more people are consuming this show than ever, but it's because of you guys and girls. It's sharing with friends. It's talking. It's clicking. It's whatever. Could not do it without all of you. And I just want to thank you sincerely for the support. YouTube numbers doubled from January 1 to May 1, 2023 over 2022. We've been up every single month of 2023. January up, February up, March up, April up. May is off to a good start. Thank you all to all of you for what you do. That is all for today's show. And it is time for me to get out of here. So thank you again for your support. I am done with today's Aaron Torres pod. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, UFA. Don't block me, bro. I'll be back on Friday. We're going to have a fun Aaron Torres pod. Talk soon, people.